Pine Hollow was the kind of place most people forgot about once they'd driven past it. A speck of a town in rural Illinois, surrounded by endless fields of corn and soybeans. It was home to just over 2,300 residents. It had one high school, one gas station, and a main street where the diner, hardware store, and butcher shop sat shoulder to shoulder like old friends. Life was steady, predictable, almost dull. Folks left their keys in their trucks and waved at strangers passing through. Outsiders called it sleepy. But for the people who lived there, Pine Hollow was perfect. That sense of safety, however, was shattered when a truth too dark for the town to comprehend began to seep out from behind the swinging doors of Briggs Meats and Provisions. Walter Briggs had been part of Pine Hollow for decades. His butcher shop, a squat brick building with fading white paint, was where families picked up ribs for cookouts and hams for Christmas dinner. He was a man of routine, opening the shop every morning at 6 sharp, greeting customers by name, and never missing Sunday service. Walter was in his early 60s, broad-shouldered but stooped with age. His thinning gray hair and weathered hands told the story of a man who had worked hard all his life. People liked him, trusted him. For the town, Briggs was steady as bedrock, someone you'd never second-guess. What no one knew was that beneath his polite nods and gentle chuckles, he carried secrets that would one day drown Pine Hollow in horror. In the summer of 1998, a drifter named Kyle Morris wandered into town. He was the kind of man people barely noticed, unkempt, carrying everything he owned in a frayed backpack. Kyle asked around for day labor and ate meals at the diner, hoping to earn enough to move on. One night, after being seen heading toward the edge of town, Kyle simply vanished. Locals assumed he'd hitched a ride or hopped a freight train. No missing persons report was filed. No one in Pine Hollow thought much of it. People come, people go. Life continued as usual. But Kyle was only the beginning. The following spring, on a warm April afternoon, 16-year-old Molly Jenkins walked into Briggs' shop. She was buying steaks for her father's birthday dinner, a small errand her mother had sent her on. She smiled at Walter, who handed her a brown paper bag and wished her well. That was the last time anyone saw her. When Molly failed to return home, her parents called the sheriff. Search parties scoured cornfields, combed through barns, and dragged the nearby river. Posters went up, the high school canceled sports, and for weeks, Pine Hollow held its breath. But there was no trace of Molly. Walter Briggs, ever the kind neighbor, delivered meals to the Jenkins family during the search. People whispered about strangers passing through, about traveling workers who sometimes stopped in town. The idea that one of their own might be responsible never crossed their minds. Over the next 5 years, disappearances followed with a cruel rhythm. A farmhand who had argued with his employer, a salesman who had stopped for gas, a woman whose car broke down on the edge of town. Each case baffled investigators. Sheriff Randall Cole insisted the town was safe. "We're looking at outside elements," he told the press. But people started locking their doors, walking their kids to school, and glancing twice at strangers in the diner. Still, no one suspected Walter. He was always there, behind his counter, knife in hand, smiling as he wrapped cuts of beef in white butcher paper. The truth began unraveling in 2004, when a young health inspector named David Foster arrived for a routine check of Briggs Meats. Pine Hollow had rarely seen inspectors. Most businesses were family-run and passed without issue, but David was thorough. In the back freezer, he noticed an odd smell. Not the sharp tang of beef or the faint sweetness of pork, but something sour, metallic, wrong. Walter brushed it off. "Old pipes," he said with a chuckle. But David wasn't convinced. He collected samples from the freezer and noted his concerns in the report. A week later, the state police arrived with a warrant. What they found behind the heavy freezer door was beyond comprehension. Beneath layers of neatly wrapped cuts of meat lay packages that didn't belong. Inside them were human remains carefully butchered, labeled, and frozen. DNA analysis later confirmed the remains of Molly Jenkins, along with at least 3 other missing persons. When officers arrested Walter, he was standing calmly behind his counter, apron stained with blood, sharpening his knife. He didn't resist. Instead, he set the knife down, pulled off his gloves, and said, "I knew this day would come." The trial that followed drew national attention. Prosecutors painted Briggs as a predator hiding in plain sight, a man who lured victims under the guise of hospitality and butchered them in the very shop where families bought their Sunday roasts. The most chilling revelation came from forensic analysis. Traces of human tissue had been found in some of the sausages Briggs sold. Gasps filled the courtroom when this was revealed. Pine Hollow's residents, people who had eaten his food for years, suddenly faced the unthinkable possibility that they had consumed it. Briggs never offered a clear motive. Some speculated that grief over his wife's death years earlier had driven him to madness. Others believed he harbored violent urges long hidden beneath a mask of normalcy. When asked directly why he did it, Briggs simply replied, "They were already forgotten. I gave them purpose." Walter Briggs was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed little emotion as the verdict was read, his face as expressionless as the day he was arrested. For Pine Hollow, the damage was permanent. The butcher shop was demolished within months, the lot left vacant, weeds overtaking the cracked concrete foundation. Parents who once let their children roam freely now clutched them tightly. The town's trust, once its greatest pride, had been gutted. Even now, decades later, Pine Hollow struggles to distance itself from its past. Outsiders call it that place with the butcher. Locals, though, rarely speak Walter's name. At the diner, old-timers lower their voices when the subject comes up, muttering about how many people Briggs might have really killed. The remains found in the freezer accounted for only a handful of the missing. What about the others? Some believe Briggs buried them on farmland he occasionally worked. Others think the river holds its secrets. But the scariest theory is the simplest, that the true number of his victims will never be known. Pine Hollow, once a sleepy town where nothing bad ever happened, became a byword for horror. And the memory of Walter Briggs, the butcher of Pine Hollow, still lingers in every shadow, every whisper, and every locked door. If you're not subscribed to Twisted Minds Vault, you're probably never going to see us again. If you are, then congratulations. You're among the 1% of people who get to watch and listen to unsolved mystery cases.